بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين في المقالات. Okay, so as you guys know, this is a text by one Sheikh Abdul Karim Al-Mudarris, who is a important Iraqi Kurdish scholar. I don't know if you guys got a chance to look at his biography.
Yeah, I read a little bit of the biography that you sent.
Yeah.
In one of the WhatsApp groups.
Yeah. Right. He was a very learned man, interesting scholar. He was known for being a good teacher, and he wrote a lot on these kinds of introductory issues. Wrote introductory texts for a lot of the tullab at the time. I'm not sure exactly why he did that, but I take it's because of something to do with maybe the just kind of confusion, possibly because of the lack of a kind of systematic curricula at the time. Maybe that has something to do with, I don't know, perhaps the colonial aftermath, or something along those lines. So, but he really focused his efforts in sort of beginning from the basics and helping students really solidify like the introductory accounts before moving on to any of the intermediate or higher texts, right? And also he was affiliated with a tariqah, as was pretty normal at the time. I think he was, I forget, one of the links that I sent mentioned the tariqah that he was affiliated with, but yeah, like I said, that was pretty common. His own standing in terms of his school, I believe, was Ash'ari, right? He was an Ash'ari mutakallim, but I don't think that takes away from like the quality of these introductory works that he wrote. They're very useful and they're very fair. They're very fair-minded. He really tries to sort of explain in as objective a way as possible the different points of view of the different schools, right? Like in this text, we'll see he'll get into the main divisions of reality according to the hukama on the one hand and the mutakallimin on the other, right? Briefly explaining exactly like how they carve up the world. So this text in particular is divided into, you could say, 13 main sections. Okay, so it has two introductory sections, about 10 sections in the like body of the treatise, all of which have to do with the what he calls the Maqalat, as we'll see, and then he ends up with a conclusion. And within the conclusion, and also throughout some of the body of the text, he'll have these what he calls fawaid, which are like beneficial points, useful points that pertain to some larger point that he's making within that section. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll just read through the text and translate as we go, and maybe someone, if they're interested, can actually note down the translation, and it's something that we could, collectively refine and improve upon, right? And like I was telling Nassar, maybe even like get it published, right, with some notes or something altogether, and inshallah it'll be of use to others. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, so like when you say that he wants to divide the aspects, let's say, of reality, like is it fair to say that, properly speaking, this is a book on ontology? He wants to speak about what the mutakallimin and Falasifa believe to be aspects of reality and how they are divided. Is that like fair to say, or is that somewhat misleading perhaps?
No, I think that's fair to say. So this is something that I don't want to get into too much, namely the issue about like what the categories are supposed to refer to. There's a disagreement about this between the hukama, both ancient, like the ancient Greek tradition, and also the Islamic tradition. Disagreeing about this, about what they're about, right?
Yeah.
Two main opinions. One is the categories are about ways of speaking about things, Okay, so they're linguistic categories, right? That's one opinion, right? Because Aristotle himself, who is the one who, at least famously, initiated this discussion, right? He's not clear about it, right? I say famously because there are some reports that certain other thinkers prior to him also wrote on this issue, and one thinker in particular, I forget his name, but he had a book apparently named the categories, and some say that Aristotle took that from him, right? But Aristotle became well known for it. Interestingly, Sohrawardi, Sheikh al-Ishraq, mentions this. He says the category is actually not something that Aristotle originated. There was another philosopher before him who had talked about this. Anyway, so the main opinions on that question are, on the one hand, the categories are about language, how we talk about things, as opposed to the things themselves. In other words, opposed to ontology, as you just said, Nassar. And the other opinion is that, no, they're ontological categories, not linguistic. Okay? And I think the mashhur view among the ancients is the latter, that they're ontological categories. That is, that they're categories of reality, being. Okay? And this is the position the Shaykh himself, rahimahullah, takes. So you could be confident that that's the correct position. Okay? So
yeah,
just do taqlid here.
One is more, that's like a nominalist position, right?
Yeah. I think so, right? But it's good you bring this up because there's a ikhtilaf about this, right? Sheikh Mudarris here is going to assume the latter, right? He's just going to assume that.
Yeah.
Because this treatise itself is not the place to discuss that sort of thing. But he's going to sort of just assume, I take it, the mainstream view. And what he's going to set himself out to do is just clarify what these categories are, right? For a certain ulterior purpose, which, as we'll see, he'll mention, is to help students understand the rational disciplines, but specifically logic, mantiq. Okay? So as I was saying, we'll read the text slowly. If someone wants to jump in and read as well, to practice their reading, more than welcome. And then we'll also translate the Arabic after we read, and maybe someone can note that down as we go. And you feel free to interject with questions, comments, objections, criticisms at any point, right? You don't have to sort of wait till the lesson is done or something like that. It'll be more informal. Sah? That makes sense?
Yeah,
the audio. Okay, yeah.
I'll do translating. I'm writing it down as we go.
Okay, that's appreciated. It's really appreciated. Yeah, and we'll sort of refine it all together, right? Because just to kind of, I wanna try and render it into idiomatic English, but without sacrificing, the finer points, right? I don't want to be too literal so that it doesn't sound like normal English to a native English speaker, but I also don't want it to be so loose that some of the important points, technical points, get lost. Okay, so that's the ideal. Okay. So let's then begin with that note. It's customary to begin by reciting the Fatiha for the author of the text, for his services. Inshallah, he'll benefit by it, just as inshallah we'll benefit by this treatise that he wrote. So let's briefly recite Surah Al-Fatiha for his soul. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين. Okay. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. You guys can see the text, right? Okay. وَبِهِ نَسْتَعِينَ فِي الْمَقَالَات. In the name of God, the merciful, the compassionate, in Him we trust, or on Him we rely. فِي الْمَقَالَات. On the, you could say, discourses, or maqalat can even translate as doctrines. Okay, he'll later clarify that he's called this treatise Al-Maqalat fil Maqulat. So statements or doctrines about the categories. Okay? So the Maqulat are the categories. Okay. So he's going to begin by, of course, praising God and sending blessings upon the Prophet ﷺ. But he does that in a certain manner, as we'll see. What's that manner? There's a certain technique that you'll find in the classical texts that authors usually begin their introductions by, which is called in Arabic bara'atul istihlal. Okay, and it translates something like a beautiful beginning. And what they do is in going about this way is they begin the intro by mentioning or using certain terms that are part of the discipline that they're about to engage in. Okay, it's called bara'atul istihlal. Okay, so for example, if someone is writing a treatise on fiqh and an introduction where he'll, among other things, explain his purposes and all that, but when he's praising God and sending benedictions upon the Prophet and so on, he'll use terminology that's technical fiqh terminology. Okay? And if someone does that in mantiq, he'll also use terminology in that praise that's technical logical terminology. And so on in other disciplines, right? This they do in order to, they say, sort of facilitate and the discipline for this beginning student, and also to kind of increase his desire for it, to pique his interest, right? To capture his attention, right? This is very common in the tradition, right? So we'll see now. He does exactly just that in this first paragraph by employing terminology that in the body of the treatise he's going to bring up again and clarify in detail, right? But at the beginning of it, when you don't know those terms, it's not clear to you what they mean, or at least it's not clear to you what they mean in their technical senses. Okay, so قال شيخ المدرس رحمه الله الحمد لله الحكيم المنان والصلاة والسلام على سيد النبي النوع الإنسان. Right? Praise be to God, the wise, the gracious, or the benefactor, and blessings and peace be upon Bani Naw al-Insan. Blessings and peace be upon the Sayyid of the children of the species humanity, right? And here already, as an example of this sort of thing that I'm talking about, okay, he uses no. Okay, this is a technical term. No al-insan. Right? Who is this Sayyid of the species of humanity? He says, Sayyidina Muhammad al-Mab'uth bilami' al-hikmati wa-sati' al-burhan. Our master Muhammad, the one sent with brilliant wisdom, hikmah, and radiant demonstration. So again, two more terms. Okay? So, no species, hikmah, and burhan. وعلى آله وصحبه المهتدين بهديه or بهديه المجتهدين في تنوير الأذهان. And also on his companions, the rightly guided, by his conduct or his manner or his way, right? I.e. his sunnah. Okay, those who strive to enlighten minds, right? So another term, technical term, adhan. Okay, so we have let me see, we have no, we have hikmah, we have burhan, and we have adhan. And finally, on the tabi'ina lahu bi ihsani ala marr al-zaman. And then on those that follow him in goodness or in virtue, right, throughout time. And this is another term, right? So he uses 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 technical terms, right? All part of this, as we'll see, discipline of the categories for this text that he's going to clarify. Okay, so that's an example of bara'atul istihlal. Wa ba'd. Now he's here going to explain the reasons for the composition of this treatise, right? And he's going to say, like I mentioned earlier, that it's to do with helping introductory students in the rational sciences, but specifically mantiq, to learn that discipline. Because logic, as it was studied, especially after Ibn Sina and people like Fakhruddin Razi, right? It became such a important, essential part of the curriculum, right? And because it was taken from the books of the Islamic philosophers, it was filled with their technical terminology, right? And beginning students had trouble understanding them, and so trouble learning logic, right? So much so that even in his own day, okay? So he's like, this is what, he passed away, I think, 2005, right? So in this context, students of knowledge had a hard time learning logic because they were not familiar with technical terminology. So he said, I wrote this in order to, this work on the categories in order to explain these terms that they'll come across, right? So he says, وَبَعْدْ فيقول الفقير إلى ألطاف مولاه القدير عبد الكريم عفا الله عنه وعن إخوانه بفضله العظيم. And so then the servant or the indigent, the one in need of the lutf of his Lord, the powerful, Abdul Karim, may Allah forgive him and his brothers by his magnificent fadl. He says, okay, يعني شيخ مدرس, لما كان المنطق مقياسا للعقول ومعيارا للنظر المقبول وكانت كتبه المتداولة عندنا محتوية على كثير من مصطلحات الحكمة فصعب بها فهمه على الطالبين. He says, since logic is the measure, miqyas, of intellects, and a criterion for acceptable nazar, okay? And since its books, i.e. the books of logic that are compiled among us, contain many technical terms of hikmah, of philosophy, okay? Since that's the case, sa'aba biha fahmuhu ala talibin. It's difficult. Understanding it has become difficult for the students of knowledge. Okay? So, what did I do as a result of that? بادرت إلى تأليف رسالة في المقولات العشرة. So I was quickly moved to compose, يعني as a result of that, a treatise on the 10 categories, Al-Maqalat al-Ashara. Okay? وأشياء أخرى من المهمات المشتهرة. And other things that are well known to be important. Okay? Why did he do this? So that تكون مقدمة إعدادية لأولي الهمة في فهم ما يجدونه من علم الحكمة. So that it becomes a preparatory introduction for those that have himma, for those that have resolve, a kind of strong resolve, for understanding that which they find in the discipline of philosophy. Okay. Now he's going to explain its structure. وَرَتَبْتُهَا عَلَى مُقَدِّمَتَيْنِ وَمَقَالَاتٍ وَخَاتِمَةٍ. And I organized it into 2 introductions, into several discourses, yani 10 in total, and a conclusion. وَسَمَّيْتُهَا, and I called it Al-Maqalat fil Maqulat. Statements about the categories, let's say. We can refine that translation later. وَهْدَيْتُهَا إِلَى أَصْحَابِ الطِّبَاعِ الْفَاهِمَةِ. And I gifted it to the possessors of understanding natures, i.e. those who have a nature that is sort of understanding. Right? Not dull people. وَاللَّهُ سُبْحَانَهُ وَتَعَالَى أَسْأَلَ النَّفْعَ بِهَا لِي وَلِلْطَالِبِينَ فِي الدُّنْيَا وَيَوْمَ لِقَاءِ رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ. And I ask God for benefit from it, for myself and for those students of knowledge in this world and on the day when we meet the Lord of the worlds. Right? So that's a noble intention. Sah? Is that clear?
Yeah.
Any questions? Okay, so now he moves on to the first introduction. He said there were 2 introductions. Now we get into the first one. What's the first one about? In the first one, Sheikh Mudarris is going to clarify for us, since he mentioned hikmah, remember in the introduction, he's going to clarify, and also this treatise is dealing with a subject that's treated in hikmah in philosophy, namely the categories. He's going to clarify for us what hikmah is as a technical term. Okay, not hikmah linguistically or hikmah as it's used ordinarily, or something like that. But hikmah as a technical term, yani the discipline, the science that's called hikmah, usually translated as philosophy, right? How do the people of hikmah see their discipline? Okay, he's going to clarify that for us, and then he's going to clarify after that the divisions of hikmah. Okay, and all of this he's drawing on from the books of the Islamic philosophers themselves, like for example, Shaykh al-Ra'is rahimahullah, or Al-Mu'allim al-Thani rahimahullah, and others in that tradition, right? But obviously he's not going to quote them or anything like that, but he's just kind of summarizing what is said in those books, right? So he's going to clarify what hikmah is as a discipline, okay, what it studies, and in doing that he's going to clarify what it studies and also its goal. And then after that he's going to get into the main divisions of hikmah, right? Okay, so with respect to the first goal, what is hikmah? According to the Islamic philosophers, hikmah philosophy is defined as follows. It's a knowledge, an ilm, of the states or features of external realities, okay, in accordance with how they are in themselves, to the extent of human capacity. Okay? As he says here, Al-Muqaddimat al-Ula, the first introduction, Al-Hikmah. What is hikmah? It is علم بأحوال الموجودات الخارجية على ما هي عليه في نفس الأمر بقدر الطاقة البشرية. Okay? So that definition contains several elements, which I think it's important to clarify. Right? Some of which he does clarify, as we'll see. By the way, this Risala also has footnotes. Okay, these footnotes are from Sheikh Mudarris himself. Okay, so in these footnotes, we'll see he expands upon certain claims, statements he makes in the body of the text. Okay, so we'll get a chance to read those as well. Okay, so hikmah is a knowledge, it's an ilm of what? Of the states of external existence. That's two. Okay, so we can say, so we have an ilm, it's one element of أحوال الموجودات الخارجية, that's two. على ما هي عليه في نفس الأمر, that's third element. بقدر الطاقة البشرية, that's the fourth element. Okay, so the definition has four elements. The first of which is ilm. Okay, ilm. When you study any book of logic, it's clarified for you, the first thing that's clarified for you right at the beginning is what knowledge is and what its main divisions are, according to all schools, or at least according to the rationalists, okay, those who use nazar, okay, and there it's clarified that knowledge, okay, comes in two main types, right? I don't know if you can see it. So we have ilm. This is terrible. Okay. Yeah, it's not even.
Maybe you can use.
What's that?
Can you use that?
Yeah, right on here? Yeah, I think that's better, right?
Yeah.
That pen belongs to the Jews.
Honestly, it does. We gotta get our own next time. Knowledge, as I was saying, they divide into two main types. Okay, and this distinction comes from the second teacher. He's the first one to make it, namely Farabi. Okay, it's not in any of the Greeks. It's not in Aristotle and in no one after Aristotle. Although you could say, the elements are there, but the one who makes this distinction and really makes it the basis of all learning and teaching is Sheikh Abu Nasr Farabi, rahimahullah. Okay, so he says knowledge is of two types. Either it is tasawwur, which is conception, or it is tasdiq, which is assent. Okay, all knowledge is either anything that you either know it in this tasawwur way or in this tasdiq way, right? What's the difference here? Basically, not to go into too much detail, but just basically, tasawwur is simply the understanding of a certain meaning, right? Like if I say cell phone, you have a certain ma'na that comes into your mind. You've had a tasawwur of it, right? Or let's say you say, what's a jinn? Right? What's this word mean? And I say, oh, a jinn is such and such, right? Let's say a thing made out of fire.
So basically, you have some sort of definition of it.
Yeah. You have some kind of definition, quote unquote, right? But the point is, you have a certain ma'na that comes into your mind. That's tasawwur. Okay. Now, tasawwur can apply to single terms, right? Like if I say jinn, you have a certain ma'na in your mind. Or if I say, he went home, you know what that sentence means, so you have a tasawwur of it. Okay? You're not saying that's true or that's false. No, you just understand what it means, right? If I say blah 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 blah, and you're like, what are you talking about? What do you mean? You have no tasawwur. Okay? So tasawwur is just the conceptualization of a certain ma'na, whatever it might be. Nothing more. That's ilm in the sense of tasawwur. Clear? The other division is ilm in the sense of tasdiq, which is usually translated as assent, as I mentioned. Assent. Yani, this is the certain cognitive state in which you either judge something to be the case or not the case. In other words, you have a certain tasawwur of some ma'na, okay? For example, the coffee is hot, right? And in addition to that, you commit yourself to that being the case or not the case, right? And so you say something like, yes, I believe the coffee is hot. I.e., you affirm that it is the case, i.e. that it is hot. Or you deny that it is the case, i.e. that it is not hot. Okay? So that's a distinct mental state. Okay? There's something more than just the conceptualization of the meaning of the sentence, the coffee is hot, or anything else. Okay? You've judged affirmatively or negatively that it is so or that it is not so. That's tasdiq, assent. Right? So knowledge, all your knowledge is either going to be of the conceptual kind or the assent kind, or the judgment kind. Right? Nothing that you know, i.e. nothing that you have ilm about, falls outside of these two categories. Okay? So, when Shaykh Mudarris says, Al-Hikmah, ilmun bi ahwal al-mawjudat, ila akhirih, what kind of ilm is he talking about here? Is it the tasawwur kind? Is it the tasdeeq kind? Or is it both? What do you guys think? Ajmal says both.
Yeah, I believe he also, the mawjudat, I think that's related to tasdeeq specifically as well, right? Because
why would it be specifically related to the mawjudat? Why isn't tasawwur related to that? Specifically too.
It is.
So it
like
doesn't.
when you're saying, for example, in your example, when you say, like, if you have a tasawwur that the coffee is hot,
Yeah.
and then you affirm that it is,
Yeah.
affirming it is making a judgment.
Yes.
Right? And
Yeah.
you have a proposition which relates or corresponds to the reality of the coffee being hot.
No.
So corresponds to the mawjud, which is the coffee being hot. That's the way I thought of it.
Yeah, that's true, but that just pertains to the specific example that I gave, right, of a tasdeeq, of an assent. But the question is, when Shaykh Mudarris here, in talking about the definition of hikmah that comes from the hukama, says ilmun bi ahwal al-mawjudat al-kharijiyya, or just ilmun, okay, this first element in the definition. Ilm, as I just noted, means either tasawwur or tasdeeq. So, which one does Shaykh Mudarris intend? Either one of them or both of them? I'm just ruling out the option that it's none of them, because that makes no sense. Unless you think we know he's a mutakallim, he's not a, arif.
I mean, his Arif side is kicking.
Okay, so I'm ruling out him being an arif right away, so he does not intend what the urafa mean, okay? I know some of you would like him to intend that, but that's not what he means. So he either means tasawwur or tasdeeq or both. What sort of just immediately comes to mind? What's kind of plausible? He plausibly means which one? Which option? Ajmal says both. Well, I think that's correct. I think he means both. Okay? Now, he doesn't mean both equally, but he means both. The reason why, again, I'm assuming, he's sort of just relating the point of view of the hukama here. The hukama mean both. Okay? That is to say, hikmah is knowledge of things, both in a conceptual way, okay, which pertains to understanding the definition of things, but also in a assent way, which pertains to understanding the features of things, judging them to be the case or not the case. Okay? For example, that God exists. Okay? That God exists. I know what the word God means. Okay? Right? Let's say we say it means an omnipotent, omniscient creator of the world. Okay. I have a tasawwur of the meaning of that word. Right? But I don't have a tasdeeq yet about whether there is a God or not. or whether, more technically and specifically, whether there is something with that description. Okay, that's the question that we ask when you ask about whether there is a God, right? And this requires the answer to this one way or another, yes or no, is an answer that pertains to tasdiq, not tasawwur, right? So the hukama, I take a Shaykh Mudarris here, when they say ilm, they mean both. Yani philosophy is a knowledge that involves conceptualizing things correctly and also assenting to them correctly. Right? It's not just one. However, and he doesn't get into this here, but according to the hukama, these two are not on a par. Hikmah involves both, tasawwur and tasdiq. However, it involves one of them for the sake of the other. Which one do you think is for the sake of which one?
I think assent is for the sake of
Tasdiq? Sorry, for the sake of tasawwur?
tasawwur.
You think assent is for... Okay, so Ajmal thinks assent is for the sake of tasawwur. What about you guys?
I would say the other way around.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, they say tasawwur is for the sake of assent. Okay.
Since it seems like tasdeeq presupposes tasawwur. It depends on tasawwur.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I think we're saying the same thing.
No,
Tasdeeq presupposes tasawwur.
yeah, but the presupposition relationship is different from the for the sake of relationship.
Oh.
X can presuppose Y, okay? But that's a different relation from X is for the sake of Y. So these are two different relationships. So Nasar is saying that tasawwur is for the sake of tasdiq. Why? Because tasdiq presupposes tasawwur. Is that your thought?
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
But so you also say that tasdiq presupposes tasawwur, right?
Yeah.
But you also but the difference is you want to say tasdiq is for the sake of tasawwur. He's saying the opposite.
No, what I'm saying is, in order, like you need some sort of tasdeeq to reach to a particular tasawwur. So you have to have some sort of understanding.
You need a tasdiq to reach a particular tasawwur.
Yeah, you have to have some sort of understanding. Otherwise, you can't just.
Okay. So I think you're confusing the term. You mean you need a tasawwur to reach a certain tasdiq?
No, but the tasawwur is like to reach tasawwur. It's much harder because you need to define it. But for the definition, you need to have some understanding of the words.
So, but that's tasawwur.
Yeah.
So okay, so I think you're thinking tasawwur, but you're using the term tasdiq. Okay, so be careful with that. So you're saying tasawwur, right? You have to have a tasawwur to have a tasdiq. Not that you have to have a tasdiq to have a tasawwur.
No, but I'm not using tasawwur as I'm using tasawwur as a technical term here, not as a loose way of saying that I'm having some sort of tasweer of something.
No, tasawwur in the sense here that we just clarified.
No. In that
No,
sense,
in that
yes.
sense.
Okay, no. I was using it as a technical term.
No, the technical term is this sense. The technical term of tasawwur is the one that I explained. Namely, what? Oh my God.
You have to read something.
I didn't know. Okay. It's 60 minutes as opposed to 40. Salam.
Assalamu alaikum. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yeah, can you hear me?
Okay, yeah. That's what I wanted to mention. That it was going to end.
Yeah, I actually didn't realize there was that time limit, but it's 60 minutes. Okay, that's not bad. Okay, good. Okay, so you guys with me?
Yeah.
Okay, so the technical sense is having some ma'na in your mind, understanding the meaning, whether it be through a definition or something else, and that's it, right? Tasdiq is in addition to having that understanding, you also make a judgment, positively or negatively, right? So the question is, okay, ilm here means both of them, tasawwur and tasdiq, right? Ilm, tasawwur kind of knowledge of mawjudat and tasdiqi knowledge. However, are they equal? Are they equally intended? or is there some kind of a relationship between them? According to the hukama, there's a relationship between them, right? Now, and that relationship is explained in terms of for the sake of, right? So the question is, which one of them do you guys think is for the sake of the other? Is tasawwur for the sake of tasdiq? In other words, I'm only looking to have tasawwurat so that I may come to have tasdiqat. Or is it that I'm only looking to have tasdiqat so that I may have tasawwurat? If that makes sense.
Yeah, the latter.
You think it's the latter.
I think it's the latter.
So you think tasdiqat are sought for the sake of tasawwurat. Okay. Nasar is saying the opposite.
The opposite?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
What did Waris say?
I agreed with Brother Nassar.
Okay, so 2 against 1 here. If I could weigh in on this, I'll say, and this as a so let me state what I think is the case and then give an argument from it. But then the argument is going to be naqli. It's not going to be an aqli argument, okay? And I'll just leave it at that because it's not the place. So I think the truth of the matter is what you two say. Tasawwur is for the sake of tasdiq. The reason, and here's the argument, the naqli argument, it's an argument from authority, is because this is what the Shaykh says. So I'll just leave it there. There's a reason for that, but I'm not going to get into that, okay? Yani a rational argument. But that's what he says, but there's ijma' on it. That you have tasawwurat. In other words, you look to understand what things are, their definitions, their meanings, so on and so forth, so that you may come to make correct judgments about them. Okay? Not just you understand what it is and that's it, you can go home. It's you understand what it is, you have a tasawwur of it, so that on the basis of that you can then make true judgments of that thing. Right? So like in the example I gave with God's existence, right? We have a tasawwur of the word God. Okay, what do you mean by God? And I say, it means an all-powerful creator. Okay, now you have a tasawwur. Now the question is there an all-powerful creator? Is there such a thing? Tasawwur does not answer this. If I say there is because of ABC, and then you accept ABC, you now have a tasdiq. Or if I say no, there isn't because of ABC, and you accept ABC, you now have a tasdiq that it's not the case. So your tasawwur was in order to have tasdiq about this thing that we're talking about, which we both understand. Okay? And this will be clarified further as we go. So, back to the definition. Al-hikmatu ilmun. Whether tasawwur or tasdiq. Okay? بأحوال الموجودات الخارجية. That's the second element of the... by the way, sorry, any questions about that? Any objections? Any concerns? Any thoughts at all?
I just had a question, actually.
Tayyib, go ahead.
So, I definitely misunderstood something, because I thought that this is how some, I guess, like if you read the Abhadi's SNOG translated by, I forget her name, I think.
Fariel?
I forget her name. Yeah. She says that tasdeeq is truth-making.
Okay.
That's the easiest way to put it. So, we wouldn't say that tasdeeq, or the sanad, is a truth maker for a proposition. Like
No.
Okay, good.
No. That's actually misleading.
Yeah, that's after tasdeeq, if anything.
No, the truth maker, the tasdeeq is something epistemic. The truth maker is something ontic.
Yes, correct.
Okay?
Okay,
So,
thank you.
tasdeeq is an epistemic state. It's a state that pertains to the knowing subject. The truth maker is something that pertains to the object known. Okay? So the tasdeeq pertains to the alim. The truth maker pertains to the ma'loom. Okay? Okay. Yeah, Ajmal, did you have anything to say about that? About the tasdeeq, tasawwur? Yeah, think about it. But that's how they understand it, right? It's that you come to understand what things are in order to make judgments about them. True judgments, right? It's like, I want to know if X is Y. Not just, I know X, what X is, and I know what Y is, for the sake of knowing whether X is Y or not. Okay? And knowing that is tasdeeq, which is knowing just X what Y is, that's tasawwur. Okay, so the second element of the definition. بأحوال الموجودات الخارجية. Okay, the states of the external existence. right? By this, Sheikh Mudarris means the states of existence that fall under one of two main categories, namely necessary things, necessary beings, okay, or contingent beings. And then the contingent, as we'll see, is further subdivided, okay? And these are external, okay, where this qualification is meant to rule out the existence being like, for example, fictions of the mind, okay? Hikmah is not a knowledge of fictional beings, things that we make up, right? Things that have no reality in any way out there, independent of us. Things that depend on our own like subjective considerations. Okay. Al-mawjudat, ahwal, mawjudat kharijiyya, one of the things it rules out is these kinds of things. Okay. Sorry? Yeah.
The mawjudat means has to have a concrete existence, not like a mentally constructed.
Well, we have to be careful with that because as we'll see, there's a sense in which some things that just have mental... Yeah, but there are some things that have only a mental kind of being, but hikmah still pertains to them. So that's why I say mental, but in the sense of fictions.
Yeah.
Fictions, things that we make up. Okay, so let me give you an example. Like, for example, say...
like a centaur, for example.
Yeah,
a unicorn.
Yeah, right. What are the properties of a unicorn? What's the nature of a unicorn? That's not a real thing, right? So hikmah doesn't...
You're making a composition of yourself.
Yeah, you make it up, right? There's a term for them in the tradition. They are things that are ikhtira'i, invented by the mind. Ikhtira'i, right? Hikmah is not knowledge of the states of these kinds of things, because these kinds of things are not external, objective beings, right? What they are, in other words, depends purely on us. So if you say a unicorn is a horse-like animal with 10 horns, and I say it's one, it doesn't matter. It's a made-up being. There's no fact about it, right? Or if you say, I don't know, Harry Potter goes to this school as opposed to that school, it's interest relative. There's no fact of the matter about it. It's fictional, So the ahwal of fictional things are excluded here, right? We might agree among ourselves, you and I, or the larger community, that, for example, there's a unicorn has one horn, and then we talk about that as if it's true, but that's just conventional. It's not something that holds by nature, independent of our conventions. Unlike, for example, that certain trees don't shed in the winter. That's a fact independent of us, right? Or that certain animals are viviparous.
So can you say that the sifat of Kharijiyya like entails that?
Yeah,
Whether
mawjudat.
something is mumkin or arab.
No, not
Sifat?
no, not mumkin or arab.
No, what I'm saying is that when we say mawjudat of Kharijiyya, that entails that. We're not talking about mumkinat or arab,
No.
which is not existentiated externally.
Yeah. So yes to one part of what you said, but no to the other. Yes to the part that it doesn't say anything about mumkin or being mumkin or arab, so it doesn't exclude them. But what it does exclude is fictional beings.
Fiction.
Yeah. So mawjudat al-kharijiyya as opposed to fictional entities. Okay.
Also, suppose we can say just mawjudat, then there's a possibility
Exactly.
of including those as well.
Exactly.
But as soon as we say Kharijiyya, then we're
Now,
excluding them.
exactly. So
That's
kharijiyya
a Kharijiyya.
excludes them.
Yeah. Because Kharijiyya is outside Zihn, right? It's not Zihni anymore.
Well, see, it's actually broader than that. It includes what's outside zihin, but this outside zihin can be taken in two ways. Either in the sense of it exists, let's say, in the external world, right? Let's say the external sensible world or the external immaterial world, right? Well, that's one sense. The other sense is kharijiyya in the sense of it's outside our mental constructions. Now, this is important. The second category is broader because there will be things that are only in the mind, as we'll see, but they're not made up by us. Hikmah pertains to them too. They're not fictional. Okay? Like, for example, species. The concept of species or genus and other such things, they're not out there. But they're also not fictions of the mind in the way, for example, a unicorn.
Khariji, right?
Khariji in the second sense.
In the second sense, yeah.
They're khariji in this broader sense, but they're not khariji in the specific sense of being something in the external world.
Yeah.
Okay?
Because Khariji incorporates both.
So here kharijiyya means this broader sense. So that it even includes certain things in the mind.
Yeah.
Okay?
Which is mumkin, for example.
Which are mumkin, and they have other features, and those features are not dependent on us. In the way, for example, some other mental things, like fictional entities, their features depend on us. So, and kharijiyya, in that broad sense, does not apply to the fictional things. Okay, I wish I had a proper markers I could write this down, because these are important divisions. Maybe next time we'll revisit this. But
although they can,
what's that?
Sorry, I just want to make a last point.
Yeah.
So although the essences, right? So we would say that the essences, like the essence of the human being, is khariji. We know that it's in the supreme intellect, but it is also like khariji in the second sense, in the sense that it inheres in particular material beings, right? So is that right?
Sorry, of the what?
So it's khariji also in the second sense, i.e. that the kulli tabi'i, the natural universal, they inhere in material things.
Yeah.
So they're khariji, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. But when I gave the example of species and genus, that's not it. I'm talking about species as a species. Right? I'm not talking about some nature that has the property of being a species in the mind. The nature can exist outside, right?
Yeah.
But the notion of species itself, that only exists in the mind. Okay?
Yeah, that's a concept.
And that concept is not a concept like the concept of, for example, unicorn.
Yeah.
Where the unicorn concept is something that I just invented. Okay?
Yeah,
the concept of species I don't invent.
Yeah.
But it only exists in the mind. There's no species out there. There are particular, let's say, animals that belong to a species, but the species itself as a notion is not out there.
Yeah, those are what we call the logical objects.
Exactly. So these logical objects exist only in the mind, but they are khariji in this broader sense here. Okay?
Yeah.
Which distinguishes them from concepts that only exist in the mind, but that are fictional concepts. That's excluded by khariji. So hikmah is a ilm then that pertains to, okay, al-mawjudat al-kharijiyya in the broad sense of those existence which do not depend on our mental activities. Okay? So that includes things that exist in the external world outside of our minds, but also things that exist only in our minds, but which we don't invent. Right? So, in other words, kharijiyya excludes the fictional beings. Hikmah is not about the ilm of the ahwal of those fictional beings.
So what distinguishes between this and other? Like the difference between a centaur and a species, for example, because both are in the mind.
As we'll see, this species.
Maybe we're jumping ahead.
We're actually not going to get in. We're actually not going to get into that here.
Okay.
But it's a good question. It's an important question, and the difference is going to pertain to the following: that a species has what's called a manshaya intizar dar kharij. Okay, unlike a centaur or other fictional cross. In other words, there's something out there fil kharij that the mind extracts. Okay, it does intizal. Whereas with fictional things, the mind doesn't do intizal, but as I said, ikhtira. It invents it. Okay, creates it itself. But out there, it analyzes a certain concept that comes from out there, a certain nature that comes from out there, and on the basis of that analysis, it discovers certain things about it. Okay?
So it's more like
so it discovers them.
Like deduction?
Deduces.
Like deduces, right?
Yeah,
So
and other things. Yeah, it Exactly. It discovers and then extracts a
And
notion and then gives it a name.
Oh.
Whereas with these fictional
Yes.
beings, it doesn't do that. It just invents them.
Well, it can deduce anyways, because there's nothing to deduce. It's just a
Yeah,
figment of
exactly. It's a
imagination.
figment.
Figment
Literally,
of
it's something that the mind creates itself.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, that's
So
yeah.
that's the key difference. That's the
Yeah.
key difference. But there's a way. There's more to say about
Yeah.
that by way of specifying.
You know, that's clear.
But that's the key difference is that one has a manshay intiza,
Yeah.
the other one doesn't.
Sorry, so what's intizar?
Intiza extraction.
What are the root letters of that? Just one.
Naza'a. Noon. Ze ayn.
Thank you.
Yeah. Manshay intiza. Yeah, that's really important. But that's the difference. So hikmah is the ilm of the ahwal of mawjudat kharijiyya, whether they're kharijiyya in the sense of outside the mind, or kharijiyya in the sense of their manshay intiza is outside the mind. Right?
So that's why Shaykh says that the phoenix is not mumkin, is arad. Is that why?
It's a muhal.
It's a mahal, it's arad.
Yeah, not arad but muhal.
Yes,
Yeah.
it's mahal because it's
Yeah, but there's a reason why
fictional.
it's fictional, and exactly there's a reason why he says that. But it's different from something like the concept of a species, okay, which is mental but not fictional.
Species.
Not fictional,
Yes.
right? Not fictional. Okay, so that's then mawjudat kharijiyya. Is that clear?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Waters, you with us?
I'm with you.
Okay.
See, the one word in Arabic makes it clear. Intizar and
Yeah.
ikhtira.
Intizaa and ikhtira. So certain mafhumat are mafhumat intizaiya and others are mafhumat ikhtiraiya. Okay?
Yep. So I gotta drop off now.
Okay. We can stop here. Inshallah. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. So we stopped on, so that's page 92, line 2. Okay? We'll pick up from there next time, inshallah.